Part 2 is right around the corner and the Honkai community is excited. Some people are excited.
This is fine.
Okay, I am excited. While thinking about all the possibilities this fresh start can bring us, I wanted to compile a list of things I wish to see moving forward. Please note that these are things that I want to see added during part 2, not necessarily in 7.3. If we can get at least 2 or 3 points from this video in 7.3, I will be more than happy. I won't be mentioning things like improved graphics, new UI, mouse support for the PC version, and aerial combat because these were already confirmed. So, without further ado, here are 10 things that I want to see in part 2. Spoiler alert, it's actually 12, but 10 sounds way better for the title. Before we begin, shout out to Muhammad Afri for finding the Chibi Prometheus in the last video. From this video onwards, instead of choosing the first person who finds her, I will randomly choose someone who comments with the correct timestamp. I think it's more fair that way. Also, this time I made it harder for you to find her. Good luck. I love the story of Honkai Impact Third, and I assume that you also have at least a vested interest in it. Otherwise, why would you be watching a lore channel, huh? But despite that, I have some issues with it. People always say that Honkai Impact Third is a visual novel with a game attached to it, and I agree. This is especially true after chapter 25, when Hoyo increased the amount of text in the main story. Unfortunately, while this decision allowed them to expand the world of Honkai Impact Third, it also alienated some players that weren't keen on the visual novel presentation and preferred a shorter, more digestible story. I liked the Moon Arc and part 1.5. However, I am aware that some people don't share the sentiment because the story got extremely long, with many wordy sentences filled with terminology. If they continue like this, it will be hard for them to get people invested in the new story, besides the niche audience that enjoys this type of storytelling. Again, I want to reiterate that I'm not saying this because I think that the current Honkai story is bad, but because I think that it's hard to get into. And I'm not the only one who shares this sentiment. Many other content creators and players expressed the same feelings. The reason why the people who didn't like this type of storytelling stuck with the story in part 1.5 was because they were invested in the characters. But this time we have a completely new cast, so it will be a lot harder to keep them engaged, especially the new players. Since I just talked about the story, I wanted to keep the next point somewhere in the same bubble. I want to preface by saying that I don't think that the inconsistent quality of the English localization is the fault of the people working on it. They seem to be doing their best with the hands they have been dealt with, but I feel like they are severely understaffed, which leads to a lot of mistakes. Let's take the last story arc for example. During chapter 40, sometimes the English text would show the names of the two cities in Fu Hua's tongue as
开明称正
and sometimes it would translate them into Enlightenment and Eternite. In chapter 42, they suddenly changed the name of Erudite Vita into Azure Vita when he was never called like that in the story. He was only addressed as Erudite Vita or Cyan. I don't get where they got Azure from. And the list goes on. They even forgot to translate entire lines of text in chapter 40. This leads me to believe that they either have multiple translators that don't communicate with each other, or that there is no one to double check the translations before going live. I truly wish the Honkai Impact Third localization team all the best, and I really hope that they are not overworked too much. Hopefully, hoyoverse will hire more people for the English localization of part 2. The new player experience is very important for the overall success of a game, especially the first few hours. In one of the Mars newsletters from a few weeks ago, Hoyoverse announced that the new players will be able to play Part 2 after reaching Captain level 30 without having to finish Part 1 first. This is a very good decision, but to be completely honest, I would have loved for the new players to start directly in Part 2. I know plenty of people who quit the game in the first few hours of Part 1 because the presentation was very outdated and it failed to hook them. Maybe Hoyoverse felt that Part 2 has too little content for now to start the game there, but I hope that they can give us a reborn tree at some point and make it so that new accounts start directly in Part 2. Don't worry guys, they will play Part 1 anyway because they will need the crystals. We need to hook them first with the modern presentation of Part 2 before emotionally destroying them with Kiana's story. Okay, this might be a controversial take, but this is my list. You don't have to agree with me on every point. I know plenty of people who enjoy this game because of the leaderboards, but I'm not one of them. Leaderboards are an archaic system designed to take advantage of whales and milk them for more money that worked well for them when gacha games weren't as widespread. But today I feel like most people look at them with dread and associate leaderboards with aggressive power creep. Don't get me wrong, even without them, the power creep would still be here, but the rewards being tied to the leaderboards make it worse. It's not like you can't clear a beast with an older, weaker battlesuit, but why would you do that when your crystal income is tied to your performance compared to other people? Nowadays, people are more off-put by this kind of tactics rather than being incentivized by it. So yeah, I would love to see the leaderboards removed. Or at least not have the rewards tied to them. Just let the amount of crystal per cycle be tied to you participating in the abyss rather than your division and your leaderboard placement. Farming Stigmata is not fun, and it takes a lot of time. Now that we can farm Stigmata for all the new Valkyries from version 7.3 onwards, I believe it's time to rework this game mode. Make it more engaging and more fun than just fighting a few mobs plus one boss that drop like flies. Or, if you want to keep it like this, give us a light button like we have for our material dailies. And, for the love of God, please make it so that you can farm Stigmata faster. I feel like the current pace takes way too long. I'm not saying that they should make it so you can get a full set in a day, but make it, I don't know, at least one set every 2 or 3 weeks. Same as Universal Mirage. Having a guild system is a great idea, but the implementation of the Armada system feels very barren to me. Being in an Armada serves little purpose, and even when you are in one, interaction with people is very limited. Maybe make it so that every guild can have a hub area where we can use chibi characters to meet, chat, interact, play some minigames together, or even form parties. Oh, wait, there's no more co-op. Which brings me to my next point. Hoyoverse just announced the removal of the co-op tab and the co-op feature from the Universal Mirage. And while I think that the raids and the co-op stages were not fun, especially on EU where you had to wait a lot of time to queue with someone, I liked the idea of having them in the game. I hoped that instead of completely removing them from the game, they could find a better way to implement them in Part 2. I would love to see new raids with updated graphics, but made simpler and more streamlined. My problem with the old raids was that they tried to do too much. I'm not saying that bosses in raids shouldn't have mechanics, but make them more suited for the type of game we are playing. Next, I would really love to see you subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more content like this, where I just talk about different aspects of the game, please let me know in the comments. Thank you. I love hunting for achievements in Genshin and Star Rail. Compared to them, Honkai's achievement system is just an abandoned idea that they update once per version with the achievement for receiving the newest battlesuit because of obligation. It's clear that they took it seriously in the beginning but gave up on it after a while. Why? I don't know. Imagine all the cool achievements that they could have added with ER, or for defeating Abyss and Memorial Arena bosses in a certain way. Like, I don't know, make something stupid and fun, like using Callan in a team to defeat False God Ado. It would certainly give people a small incentive to do something else besides following meta and fixed rotations. I feel like part 2 is the best time to revitalize the system. If you want your game to attract a global audience nowadays, English dub is a must. I feel like this is the main reason why most people don't even bother with Honkai Impact 3rd. And yes, I know it's a 7-year-old game with tons of hours of voice dialogue. The effort that it would take them to dub everything would hardly be worth the investment. But if anyone has the funds to waste, it's hoyoverse. It's clear to me that they love this game and they already took a massive risk to make part 2 in the first place. 99% of gacha game developers would have abandoned the game and made a new one instead. From my perspective, having part 2 in itself is already something that's not worth their investment. So, if they took that many financial risks with the game already, why not do one more? I'm not kidding when I say that this could make or break the success of part 2 on the global side. But it also depends on what hoyoverse wants from part 2. Do they want to keep it as a niche game globally, or do they wish to bring it closer to Star Rail? From what I saw from part 2 until now, I feel like they have pretty big ambitions with this. So I wouldn't exclude the possibility of an English dub, even if only from part 2 onwards. It is not a secret that the game's performance in the open zones is, to put it eloquently, poo-poo, bad, awful. I still remember when APHO2 was released. It was literally unplayable for some people due to how bad it was optimized. Fortunately, they've improved the optimization with time, but other zones like Elysium Everlasting and the Moon Base still run like a stop-motion film. I hope the optimization for the new zones in part 2 will be better, because no matter how much they improve the graphics, if the game runs like a potato on life support, those new graphics won't really mean much. This may be my most controversial point, but I want playable men in the game. Now, before you comment that this is a waifu game and no men are allowed, please remember that we play this game for different reasons. You might play it for the girls, I might play it for Kalpas's cake. What? I understand why some don't want men in the game, and to be fair, the game has been advertised as a girls-only game, but it also has some of the coolest cast of male characters I have seen in any gacha game. It's a shame not to have them playable. Now, do I think they will ever add men? No. The backlash would be so big that it would make the Bunny Girls incident look like a picnic. Honkai is also not a game where you can just tell people to not pull for men if they don't want to play as them. It's a competitive game with excessive power creep where every new unit is required to stay at the top of the leaderboard. It's not a matter of choice for competitive players. I'm sure that some of them have already spent thousands of dollars on this game with the promise that it will have only women as playable characters. But at the very least, we might get more male collaborators besides the male Dreamseeker. After I saw that you can walk as them in the open zones and put them on the bridge, I am pretty sure that the collaborator system is hoyoverse's way to add playable men to the game. And just to be clear, I'm stretching a lot the meaning of the word playable here. If a PlayStation version was to happen, it would be much later in the life cycle of part 2. If there is sufficient demand, this might be something that Hoyo could consider in the future. They finally fixed the PC version and added a proper mouse support, so a PlayStation version is not really out of the question if enough people want one, especially since they seem to be in a pretty good relationship with Sony. Alright, these are the 10 but actually 12 things that I would like to see in part 2. What do you want to see added or maybe changed? Let me know in the comments below.